Should be on.
All right, hopefully this is on. I'll be I'll be able to start seeing people who's popping up.
Yeah, we should be able to see everything.
All right, everybody. I told you guys that I'm at a different location right now. I can still talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm at a different location right now. I told you guys that I'd be doing a video today, and talking with Mr. McIntyre. Let him introduce himself here in a little bit, but usually he has his broadcast, the Mike and Mike show, and Peace and Wisdom show, and this time he's going to allow me to be able to ask some questions, and we're going to be able to dive into real stuff and have real dialogue. You know how I believe that if 2 people or 3 or 4 people are dialoguing, that's where people can actually start understanding and listening and whatever, and we're going to get into a deep topic, which is racism in America, and the effects on how it affects us now, maybe back then or whatever. And we're going to let Mr. Mac tell us about who he is, why this is his field especially. I would say special because I'm learning a lot. Reason why we're a little late because I was listening to a lot of stuff. When he talks, I listen. But Mac, if you want to be able to tell who you are, where you're from, and then we could dive right into a dialogue about this racism and how it affects us today.
All right, Brother Goddi, I'm glad Brother Greg Roby has me on. I listen to him a lot. I get a lot of learning and understanding of the word, and I always enjoy to hear that. And we dialogue, and what I liked was you had a couple of your teachings, and you talked about the negative effect that lingering on and continue to talk about something with no solutions or no power in it doesn't necessarily do you any good.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that. However, there are some things that we have to stay faithful to.
Okay.
We have to stay faithful because in order to get solutions, sometimes you got to have the experience.
Right.
And so I just wanted to touch base and try to give you a little insight on how I thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
And organically, we said, hey, let's get together and talk about this.
Right.
But I've been born and raised in Steubenville. I was gone for about 10 years. I live in the D.C. area.
Okay.
Learned a lot about race relations. Learned a lot about black professionals.
Okay.
Learned a lot about business, corporate world, government, and how it works. That's where I first got political.
Okay.
As it relates to Democrat, Republican type political, but the realization that everything's political really.
Okay.
In some respects. And came back here, ran into a little scene in our community, a lot of different guns and drugs that just went rampant.
Okay.
Kids didn't have a way, and so kind of like I got saved in 2000. Okay. And in 2000, my ministry became the Male Seed.
Okay.
And offshoot of that was to serve the youth. The male should serve the community, and we chose the youth to serve, and that's kind of how I got started with my what you might call activism.
Okay.
As it relates to actual civil rights, or also came kind of organically in trying to serve. We start realizing that blacks didn't have access to the same things that whites had access to. That people who made decisions for the community never really cared about the blacks within the community, things that was happening to them.
Right.
And those were things that I felt is just part of a system that kind of the people who were doing it, I wouldn't say they were racist, but the result of what their decisions end up being racist.
So you believe that racism is systematic, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And you obviously believe that there's a such thing, because that's a big topic that maybe you could get on that about. Some people say that there's no such thing as white privilege, or where do you stand with that from your experience? And
let me say this: when I say, do I believe racism is systematic? I believe there is systematic racism. I also believe there's personal racism.
Right.
Okay?
I agree.
But what I believe when you use the word racism, I believe that's the action.
Okay.
That's almost like the difference between murder and manslaughter.
Okay.
Or whatever else might be. In other words, when it's unintentional, it's a little different than when it's intentional.
Okay.
So to me, whenever you use racism, there's some intentionality behind it, or some forethought, or planning, and all that. But white privilege, I believe, is benign. White privilege is something that just is. So when you look at water, if you call water wet, it's neither bad or good. It's just what it is.
Why do you think that some Caucasian people say that there is no such thing as white privilege? Where do you think?
Because they don't understand what it is.
Okay.
And I say that to say, people, put it this way: have you ever heard somebody that say they don't have white privilege and they start to tell you how they came from nothing, or, or they don't have a lot of money, so they don't understand what it is? But that's not the answer to that.
Right.
I mean, now if you say, man, you got a lot of money, you're a economically privileged person. they might come back and see how economically privileged they are.
Right.
You just said they have white privilege. That means they're privileged because of what?
Skin color.
And so that's now what you got to break down.
Right.
What advantage do you have because you're white?
Right.
And so then you can break down the numbers in
Right.
America.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'd like to do, as you told me before, you kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to tell you where it came from.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
So let's talk about where racism started in America.
Okay.
What's some information that you can give us as far as that?
To me, racism started in America. There was already racism, but it became an actual name,
Mm-hmm.
or we put a face on it, or we put
Title or something.
we have a time period
Mm-hmm.
where you have a mark of something.
Mm-hmm.
So in America, we had the Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that came to the colonies
Okay.
came from Britain, so they were
Okay.
European.
Right.
When they came with all the ideas and the things they did in Europe.
Right.
But they had a caste system, so
Mhm.
they had royalty.
Right.
So when they came here, the only people that came here, why would you go somewhere that's barren? There was nothing here.
Right.
So the people that came here, they sent people who were criminals.
Mm-hmm.
They sent people here who could have been any types of criminals, rapists, thieves, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sent people here who were indentured servants
Mm-hmm.
and maybe had 15 years to go on their, but if they came here, they could be free.
Right.
They sent people here who were who couldn't have a certain religion there.
Mhm.
They had to be what the king's religion
Right.
was.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to have freedom over here, you could do whatever religion you wanted over here, and you could practice religion.
Right.
So you had people who were trying to practice religious freedom,
Mhm.
and then you had adventurers.
Okay.
People who said, "Man, that might be a good idea." Almost like right now, if I say, "Hey, put all your money in Bitcoin,"
Right.
that would
That
be
Yeah.
you're an adventurer.
Yeah.
You're gonna take
yeah.
risk.
Yeah.
So somebody said, "Hey, I'm gonna start over, go over to America. I can maybe say I'm a farmer.
Mhm.
I can farm the land or whatever because they're giving you land.
Right.
So they're giving you land. See, then it didn't mean it only meant you had to be just like I said,
Yeah.
a developer in Bitcoin.
Right.
If you did that 3 years ago, how
Yeah.
much money would you have?
Yeah.
So that's what you have here. So you're talking 200 years, whatever time period when you go back in the actual numbers.
Mhm.
But you had to work this. People died because of the winters, the summers.
Mhm.
They had to learn the
Environment.
groundwork, the
yeah.
environment. So you got a lot of things going on. In the meantime, as this gets a little started to flow,
Mhm.
the crown sent more soldiers
Mhm.
because since things are going, we got to control
Yeah, we
what's
can
going.
conquer it. Yeah.
We got to make sure what they're doing. So
Yeah.
as it started to go, things started happening where they were actually being able to barter, use the water, the
Mhm.
coastline, because all the colonies on the coastline, people come in boats and go
Yeah.
back and forth, and now commerce starts. You're
Right.
growing plants. You've dominated or did whatever you did, whatever. We'll talk about this later. But
Right.
the Indians showed you how to do all this.
Exactly.
The Indians told you everything, so they told you how to farm, and you start farming and doing all this stuff. So now you got crops, and now you can barter between each other. You
Right.
can trade things and all this. So now what starts to happen is soldiers and people there who were in charge talks back to the king,
Right.
because a lot of people they're still Europeans. So
Right.
the king is their,
Yeah.
but some people hate the king.
Mhm.
But that's just what they're under. They hear that there's money being made, so the king says, "Hey, they got taxes now.
Right.
I want half of their crops. They're making this down there. Well, they got something called, they got some tobacco down there.
The
They want half of this
original
down there." Exactly right. That's all it is. He said, "We want some of that money."
Mhm.
So, rightfully, in their law,
Mhm.
you got to send the tax to the king.
Mhm.
Now, people that like this, some people don't like this. Like, we did this.
Mhm.
You didn't have know nothing about this land. You had it, but there was nothing. We made this land.
Right.
Now you want something from it. So they start doing that at different times. 10, 15 years goes by. Well, we ain't doing it no more. Some people stand up.
Yeah.
They hear that there's people standing up in Massachusetts. So some people say, we're going to stand up too. Let's go up there and with them.
Right.
So they start forming this rebellion type of stuff. But what happened is the officer said, "Hey, wait, you guys are meeting?
Mhm.
You can't meet. And you can't talk against the king."
Right.
So they beat them down, imprison them, maybe kill them, whatever.
Yeah.
Time goes on, time goes on. They start getting bigger resistance.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they start saying, "Hey, listen, we ain't paying the taxes because they're not fixing our roads, they're
Right.
not doing this. And we can't say nothing about it because they say we don't have the speech to speak against the king.
Yeah.
We need to have representation in Parliament. We're given money,
Right.
taxation.
Right.
We're supposed to have representation. That's how Parliament works."
Exactly.
They wasn't getting it.
Mm-hmm.
So start getting upset. Ultimately, the laws would be passed for this and that. They didn't like it.
Mhm.
They rebelled.
Right.
And how did they rebel? They rioted.
Right.
They protested.
Right.
And then they
They was
looted.
doing that back then.
And then
but,
they
but-
looted.
But yet they said.
Because what was the Boston Tea Party? What happened in the Boston Tea Party? Remember?
Yeah, they basically, there was a massacre and all that. They was going.
And what did they do? Why did they call it the Boston Tea Party? Remember?
They formed their own thing.
No.
What?
Remember that the ships came in, they burned them up. Remember?
Oh,
What was on
okay.
the ships?
Okay.
You remember what was on the ships?
Mm-mm.
Tea.
Right.
That's why Britain and stuff, they're known for tea.
Okay.
So people, they were getting tea, and they were selling it along the coast.
Right.
So you had a business. You sold tea.
Right.
And now Paul Revere, George Washington, John Adams, Hamilton, Hancock, all them guys that got together. Paul Revere went and told everybody. They went and they burned up that shit, took all that tea and poured it in the river.
Our forefathers.
That's looting, ain't it?
Yes.
Isn't that looting?
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen to the little small business?
Right.
But seriously, what's going to happen to the small business that was selling that tea? You.
Right.
Can you make money now?
No.
Did they care?
Nope.
So you mean George Washington, John Hancock?
They was the original rioters.
No, they were the physical. Okay, you call what you want to, but right now I'm gonna call them protesters. Okay, now you can call them what you want, because I know you wasn't calling them if it was your store.
Right.
Because my point, the reason I'm trying to say this, we have to understand exactly what it is.
Right.
There was people who were loyal to the king.
Right.
But there were some people who said, no, this ain't right.
Right.
We have to do something about it.
They stood up.
The way they were able to route, the other thing what they did was they had to get weapons, because they didn't have any weapons.
Right.
So they had to go to the armories.
And
you know what they had to do? They had to kill the people, the officers that was guarding the soldiers. They had to kill them.
Just to get their arms.
So you know what George Washington, Paul Revere, and all them were? Cop killers.
That's deep, man.
Well, I mean, so what were they then?
That's deep. I ain't never heard it broken down like this, but it's so
They didn't
simple.
have no guns. They knew they wanted to fight back.
Right.
So when they got all those guns after robbing the armory, the
Right.
government armory,
Right.
they robbed the government.
Right.
They were insurrectionists.
Right.
Took the guns, went down to the river, to the Boston Harbor,
And burned up
the ships and everything. We ain't standing for this. We ain't doing that. That's looting.
Right.
That's rioters.
Right.
You said, would you call them your forefathers?
Yeah.
Well, so that's what they did. So that must have been what they were about.
Exactly.
Now, they were forced to do that.
Right.
Because, you know, what else you going to do?
Right.
Or you could just abide by the law and do what you do. But they were oppressed.
But to bring that up into the reality and the historical facts of that and seeing it that way, most people wouldn't think that they was wrong. So why is it now today when blacks are doing it?
You said the right key word. When you put black to it.
Yeah.
Because there was another insurrectionist, remember, on the Capitol Hill.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, people
okay.
refused to call them
yeah.
looters.
Yeah.
They refused. They was
Right.
they had pictures of them taking stuff out the White House.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever used the word looters. Because there is a difference between
Right.
them.
Right.
Clearly, there's a difference.
Right.
One set of groups are black and one set of groups are white.
That's deep.
Or it's either deep or it's just the facts. But deep also. So let's get back to these whatever. You remember when they were going into to Targets and all those stores, and they were calling them, and black people was quick to be jump on them and too. Oh yeah, not for looting. Protesting is okay, but the looting is wrong. Okay, the looting is wrong. What was it when they were taking flags and stuff out of the Capitol? What kind of people would do that?
Right.
What kind of people would go into Target? That's people's business.
Right.
They're tearing down people's business. That's the worst thing you can do, right? So somebody you called our forefathers, they just looted all your tea.
Right.
And everything else that was on that boat.
Right.
And they stole some of it.
Yep.
Any guns that was on there, they kept.
Right.
Okay? So that goes on. So what happens is, Great Britain gets mad. They want to bring in the government. The
Right.
forces coming.
Right.
They know they're coming.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting ready for it.
Right.
We got to stand up.
Right.
So a war ensues. And who wins? The criminals that came over from Europe.
Yep.
The people running from religious freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Europeans who are now loyal to the king and some are not.
Right.
These are the people who won. Now they're in charge because they won.
Right.
So now they have a country.
Right.
They have colonies.
Right.
And the first thing they said is we need to have laws.
Mm-hmm.
And the laws they wrote, the first thing they did was, remember when they couldn't talk about anything and the king suppressed them and said they had to do this? First thing they wanted was freedom of speech.
Right.
Because we should be able to, everybody should be able to speak because we're equal. We're not,
Right.
we should be treated a certain way.
Right.
The next thing was when they wanted to try to fight, they didn't have no guns. So they had to go to the armory, steal the guns. You have the right to bear arms
Right.
in order to
Right.
form a militia.
Mm.
So not just to hold a gun.
Yeah.
When we knew we had to fight against them, we needed an army.
Right.
And when we did fight that, if you look in history, and I'm skipping over a lot, but part of history shows you that they because of the bartering stuff they were doing with other countries, they were friends with the French.
Okay.
Now the king wasn't necessarily friends with them, but they were doing business with certain people.
Right.
So when they got in trouble and they were coming, they called some of their French friends
Right.
to get more guns and to teach them how to be a militia.
Militia. You're right.
So this is why they put this.
So that's
in
the
there.
original right to be able to bear arms was just to be in a
That's
militia.
what the Constitution says. You always talk about the word. Go to the
Yeah.
Constitution. It says you have the right to bear arms in order to form a militia.
I've never heard that, and I never.
Well,
I
we'll
don't
have to
think
look. We'll look it up.
But no, I believe you.
I don't know
I'm
for sure.
saying is,
I ain't never gonna just.
if it's that's a big thing. That's
Well, it's a big thing to those who want it to be a big thing.
right.
You see what I mean?
That's
So
interesting.
let's go a little bit further just to break this down.
Mm-hmm.
So they do all that.
Mm-hmm.
They write this Constitution down. If you look at the Constitution,
Mhm.
it says everything. And it says that because we're here in the colonies,
Mhm.
and you're over there, and we have a borders now. These are the
Mhm.
people who signed, got borders. Everybody in that border, this is your Constitution.
Right.
So you have the right to do all kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day, if me and you were standing on a corner,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't like the way this person's doing that, and we start to assemble,
Mm-hmm.
and they tell us that we can't assemble,
Mm-hmm.
would that be against the Constitution?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the only reason they're telling us is why?
Telling us that we can't assemble?
Yeah.
It's because they want the control.
Who's they? Because
The-
we're all citizens of the new colony. So
Yes.
who's the they?
Yeah, true.
And who are we? Go ahead and say it.
We're supposed to be the citizens, right?
Yeah, but why are they treating us different?
Because we ain't no citizen.
Why aren't we a citizen?
Because the way they wrote it, it wasn't meant for us.
Who's we?